Hello, everybody. Today I'm sitting here in Berkeley, California, with a young man, Eythan Caputo, who's in the Defense Language Institute studying Arabic here in Monterey, California, not far from where I am, and is also going to be joining the Arabic literature reading circle in my academy. He's been there once before, and I'm here helping my mother move out of her home, and he offered to kindly come by, and we've just had the pleasant afternoon talking about so many things that we share in common about homeschooling our children, classical education, language learning, the purposes of all this, and I just thought we were having quite an interesting conversation, and maybe if we kept up part of that might be interesting to people who are interested in my channel. So, Eythan, we were just talking about that, but what made you want to come up and help me out? How'd you know about me? What makes you want to be part of my academy and talk to me?
Yeah, so I very interested in languages for a long time, and grew up in this generation we were talking about earlier that's very focused on being online and getting anything you can through apps or through different things. And I came across your work in connection with the polyglot conferences that I was following, and really struck me your format and your way of using books but it was so much more than just learning languages, as we've been talking about. It's about learning the cultures, about learning the way other people think, the way they view the world, learning how to think, learning how to study. And that's really where I kind of reached out to you recently. Was upon entering the Defense Language Institute, I found that I really didn't know how to study very well, especially for this, for the Institute. And so, I had an individual consultation with you to come up with some of those problems and find some solutions for them. And then, you mentioned you were in Berkeley, and really just wanted to come up and hang out and talk some more. And
well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate it when you came by the Arabic class. We were reading Sinbad the Sailor in vocalized or vowelized format for native Arabic speaking teenagers, basically, or tweens or something like that, about that level. But that's where you have to sort of dig into a literature to begin with, and just different perspectives, the way you were going at you could feel your systematicity in the way you were going at the language. So, I mean, it's not a big group of kind of different people who bring different things, and that's a really nice thing about that kind of learning. It's nice to have somebody who's so seriously involved in learning as you are right now. I mean, the DLI is like the most intensive program that you can do, and yet you're seeking out something more, something else, some additional polish to give yourself, and I just think that's really admirable, because I know how intensive that is. But that difficulty of not knowing how to study is, I mean, that's been the whole sort of genesis of my whole idea of the academy. Of what I've always wanted to do as an educator is, rather than teach specific topics, teach how to teach yourself. So I have coming up in October, I'm excited about kind of a new style of course for me, the Learn as I Would Learn course for French, where I'll teach people, literally walk them through if here's an SML manual for French. It's designed to be autodidactic. If you can do it, fine, go into it. But a lot of people that I know can't. And so how do you do it? What do you literally do? Well, I'll show you. We'll just walk through it, literally. How do you do this? And after we do that once, twice, you should be good to go, thrice on your own. And then you'll also know French well enough that you can use this to learn other languages. So, most people would see this as like a French class. And, what I want to do is teach you how to use the manuals. How do you do that? How do you teach yourself? And we're teaching yourself through the menu of learning French. So, it's just very refreshing to meet somebody like you who's from a rather different environment, but also shares this sort of basic consensus that education is just not what it's supposed to be. It's, something, whether we want it for our own children, we were talking about homeschooling, for ourselves, or for something, but just, I don't know, how did it get this way? That, we want to be learning stuff, and instead of learning stuff, we have to, I don't know, do do other things.
And that's kind of the problem with the DLI was it's very, very specific. You know, it's designed, the curriculum's designed for a 19-year-old at a basic training who's never done this. It's not designed to make you this fluent speaker. Mm-hmm. It's designed to make you somebody who can listen to a news broadcast and pull intelligence out of it. Mm-hmm. It's designed to do interrogations in it, but it's...
I think my father had a friend who, I think he was able later on to become, like a library cataloger in Slavic languages, so he had some basis, but I think that, he said that he learned Russian in the Cold War, like a deal, but it was like specifically, you sit on the Berlin Wall and you listen to these radio broadcasts and you listen for these words and then you report that. I mean, that's what...
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's code cracking.
It's code cracking. Uh-huh. And that was the hard part for me as someone who really wants to learn this language for the language itself, to be told, hey, just do your curriculum, just do your book. And to do it in such a specific way where they're teaching it like a chemistry class. Mm-hmm. And I was being a little pedantic about it, but I showed my wife, who was a chemist, I don't know if I should be saying they teach like a chemistry class, like you're a chemist. And she looked at it and she said, no, this is exactly how I would teach chemistry. Mm-hmm. And that kind of made me realize, okay, as a language learner, I'm not getting what I want out of this program. Mm-hmm.
But you can see why they do it that way.
I absolutely see why they do it that way. I mean,
given their constraints, that makes sense. But if you have, I went to some conference a long time ago that was about what are the scales there? Is like Roman numerals 4, 5, or like
the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right. Yeah, they were like
plus,
they had
plus.
a conference. It's like, why can't we get the highest level? They just can't get people to that level. They can get people easily to like 4. But they can't really do it. And it was like, why can't we get people to that 5.0? They're just sort of exploring that. And it just seemed to me that pedagogically the whole, I don't know, at a certain point, language and culture you have to put culture first, and you're learning the culture and how the culture manifests itself through the language, and it's always, in language programs, it's focused on, language first and foremost and only language. And I don't know, there's just...
language in a specific way. Mm-hmm. Language as in a chemistry class, as in get your grammar rules right, get your speech patterns right, but not this, let's go have this cultural experience and use the language to do it. Mm-hmm. It's this very, we can say the language and you get a 90% on your grammar test, mm-hmm. and then you can go off to the army and do your job. And so what I ended up having to do was to, after having my consultation with you, is figure out, okay, I'm gonna study the DLI material the way the DLI wants me to study it, mm-hmm. and then I'm gonna pull other material out myself and study it in mm-hmm. the way you did your Catalan videos, the way you're gonna do the French things, and mm-hmm. In this much more holistic way, and really not expect too much out of the DLI program, not expected to do anything that it's not already designed to do. Mm-hmm. And that's really kind of the message I wanted to give, especially people out there, is if you've heard about these programs of the DLI, you've heard about the Middlebury or Concordia, understanding that these are very specific programs with very specific outcomes that they're designed for. Mm-hmm. And then if you understand administrative policy and how contracts are awarded and how, professors get paid, you pull the wool out of that stuff and you start seeing maybe decisions were made that have nothing to do with language, mm-hmm. that we're all subject to in this language program.
That's really important to know and get that message out into the language learning community, because, people, we just like to have discussions about, if we love languages, how do we plan for it? How do we set about it? It behooves us to know, is this a difficult language, a medium language, a hard language? And the place where we go for statistics with that, the only place that has it is where you are. So that's where it says, how many hours does it take to learn French? Well, who knows that? Well, the DLI knows that it takes, 144 hours, So we look to those hours as being sort of authoritative, but they're not necessarily. They fit that type of program, that type of instruction, but most people aren't in that type of program, that type of instruction. So
right.
it might be rather different. I would be shocked and surprised if, the DLI said, this is a hard language and it was really an easy one, or vice versa, but just sort of, the way languages are ranked in that system. I mean, to me, what I've always thought about it when I looked at that sort of where individual languages fall in there is that there aren't enough categories. They have like 3 or 4 categories, and, to put something like Swahili and Turkish in the same level as any European language just doesn't make any sense. It's a totally different thing. I mean, they're easier in certain things, but just to, fit them into a program that takes a certain number of hours is, I never understood that.
And even coming from different languages, we were learning about this, Idafa structure in Arabic, which for an English speaker is kind of a hard grammatical concept to grasp. But as soon as I stopped thinking about it in English and started thinking about it in Spanish, it's immediately recognizable. And so a Spanish speaker learning Arabic, they actually probably would have a much easier time because the grammar's more transparent coming from Spanish than it is from English.
I've read somewhere that I forget what the percentage is, so I don't want to say it, but it was like a very high percentage, of Spanish vocabulary comes from Arabic, and, given that, if it was, Andalus was 700 years, I mean, that's a lot of time to get a lot of vocabulary influence, so, that's interesting, but, that's my whole, that's always been my gist, and, the comparative study of everything, looking at things, looking at something like a language like Arabic or Spanish in isolation, you just miss things like you just said. You just miss the influence of things on each other. You miss cultural feedback and the like. And so, that's what I was saying before. Is that I've found more and more that by focusing my linguistic sort of aspirations, as it were, on the literary level, and having that sort of as my idea and my goal, when I get there, I find that I have a much deeper appreciation for the linguistic level of the language as well, because I can get at it through there. And so, in terms of sort of developing proficiency by focusing only on proficiency, so there are things that they can hammer too hard. And if you say, I want to focus on proficiency by focusing on use, and appreciation and getting depth of cultural immersion and knowing things, and then that might bring ultimately, greater facility in use. So I think it's something that it's sad to ignore, and it's so much fun to study that way, isn't it? It's so much more interesting to study, the text or literary thing than just to study lists.
And to study with focus. And that was the bulk of our conversation was, I have 5 kids, I have the DLI. Also, the DLI is wrapped in the military, and as someone with a higher rank, I have a lot of extra military responsibilities to do. So if I'm going to manage all of this and manage the family life and manage the physical life, and also try to do Spanish, French, Italian, Greek, all the other things I want to do as a intellectual, curious mind, how do I manage all that? And it's the 15 minutes of intense focus, of doing it systematically, trying to do it at the same time every day. God forbid, waking up early to do this thing, do these things.
I thank you for saying that. I mean, that truly is the people ask me a secret. If I had a secret, it's that. First secret is that what I do in terms of like language study and work, I don't experience as work. I experience as fun, as interest, as intellectually stimulating. That's the core idea. But then, as we were talking about earlier, I just have long since found that I am capable of sitting and studying, or walking and studying, being focused on my studies for hours at a time. But there's this impulse that we have to stay focused on one thing for a long time, and sometimes that's, I don't know, taught in schools or just developed or something. And my experience of that is that when I try to stay focused on one thing for too long, after a certain point, I start to use my energy to stay focused rather than using it more productively to do something. So I'm kind of wasting energy and just sort of ultimately burning myself out that way. So it behooves me as a learner to know how long can I focus? 15 minutes, 20 minutes? And if that's so, and if for some reason I'm dissatisfied with that, I can work at increasing that a little bit to 20, 25 or something. But if I'm not, if I know that's my, that's how long I can stay actively focused, then after 15 or 20 minutes, what I ought to do is shift focuses, do something else. And if I want to, I could be studying one language, Arabic, and so I can do 15, 20 minutes of reading, 15, 20 minutes of listening, 15, 20 minutes of writing. I could shift focuses that way, or as somebody mentioned, you've got polyitis, you've got a whole bunch of other languages. You can do 15 minutes of this, 15 minutes of that, and yes, 15 minutes is not long, or is it? I mean, our whole experience of time is so elastic. If you really are focused on something for 15 minutes, you can read a fair number of pages. You can do something. It's nothing to be sneezed at. It's not sufficient when you get to a higher level. When you want to really read a whole book in a language, you need to, sit for a long time. But if you're saying, if this is the kind of thing truly, if I can plug away at this day after day after day after day, as I told you, I'm kind of at a loss to explain how productive I was at certain periods of my life when I did that, and I look back at all the notes that I took, and I'm just like, how many hours a day did I have? But just by doing a little bit, systematically, regularly making it a habit, that really is the key.
And what's the value of studying other languages right now in the program that I'm in? If people would tell me, hey, you're in Arabic for a year and a half, that's your job, you have to pass it. So just focus on that and pick up these other things later in life. And I can't seem to do that, So what is the value to my language learning in Arabic that keep maintaining these other languages brings?
I think it is there. I really do think so, because if you think of imagine that you're sort of like a zoologist, and you've got different kinds of animals, different kinds of species, different kinds of specimens, and if you really want to, know how to take care of one, or, to look at one, if you don't know any others, how will you know what it's like? How will you know, only by sort of comparing it and contrasting with other things, seeing how it's similar, seeing how it's different, seeing how it's unique, seeing how it's, it's not unique at all, but functions just like these others. I think that that perspective on what a language is. You just mentioned Spanish in particular. If you could see reflections of Spanish in Arabic or vice versa, and other languages, I just think that in a program like you're in, obviously, you need to put 90% of your focus on one thing, but you can take that other 10% and say, well, I can spread that around in 10 or 15 minute chunks to a bunch of other things to keep them alive and to keep them giving me perspective on what I'm doing here, and make it not be sort of like an isolated task, but part of a web. I guess I've always liked the analogy of like a dartboard, where if you throw darts at it, there's like these spiderweb type things that it could catch on, and once it hits one, it could fall down, and that's a bigger thing you could hit, and you could hit that, and so the more things you throw, the more things you can hit, the more you can fill in. So, if you only have this big web out there and there's only one little thing caught in it, it's hard to interpret it and see it. Whereas if you have a lot of other things building up around it, then you've got a context for interpreting it and understanding it. And I think getting into a kind of depth that you just can't get into if you're only uniquely focused on it. Yeah. So, well, we're also talking about homeschooling your kids. You got little kids. You got 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, stuff like that.
Yeah. Very, very small. They're starting to get into it. And it's funny when I come home from Arabic class and my 4-year-old says, "Hey, I did this with English," and I say, "I did that exact thing with Arabic today too." I did my flashcards and handwriting practice, and yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Are you do you have plans for foreign languages for them?
So I think we're all starting with Latin,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's a lot of value to that. And then getting into some Greek on some. I'd like to do French. I think French and German as the scholarly languages, to have a base in those. You can do so much. My daughter, she had a German friend, so she's really wants to get into German. I want to be conscious about not pushing my own hobbies onto them, but also there's something really unique about learning a language where it's kind of a springboard. Where you hear people talk all the time, I don't think I can learn a language, I can't do this, I'm just not good with it, or I learned it once in school and now I can't pick it back up again. And so to say, hey, if I can learn a language, which we think is this big thing, then I can learn anything else. I think I was inspired by one of your sons who has studied the languages that you guys have studied, but now he's into physics. And he's doing great things with physics. And that's what I envision for them, is to have this... a lot of the advantages that Latin and Greek can give you in a classical education, some exposure to French and German, some really scholarly things, but also just have this confidence of, I learned a language, and so I can learn anything else that I ever choose to.
Yeah. I don't know, this is a trap that I can see myself walking into. I mean, obviously I love languages, that's why I want people to study languages. So. But I would not, if I could design an overall educational curriculum for the masses, I would not have it be polyglot literacy. I wouldn't give the foundations for it. I would teach French. I would teach German. I would teach Latin. I would give some other things. I would, have the foundation for saying, we have this kind of expectation of these core foundational civilizational languages that you just mentioned. But then to not push it, I would like to have the option to be there for those who are interested. I would like to have it be encouraged that, people who do this. I would hope that, an educational system that I might provide, design would produce, 25%, people who love languages and stuff, but not force them on people, because there's so many other things for people to do. There's other things people can study and learn and stuff. But, as you mentioned, I've got a son who's more inclined towards the hard sciences, but, he's still, he's got his foundational languages. He still likes learning them. It's still fun for him. It's still, an interesting, intriguing task. So, I regret that I myself have always felt, this. It's a famous, maybe your kids have read it or should read it to them. It's called The Phantom Toll Booth by Norman Juster, and it's about a kid who gets into some fantasy kingdom where there's a war between the kingdom of the words and the kingdom of numbers. And it's just sort of very clearly divided by that. And I just have always felt pulled towards the kingdom of words, and I've never understood enough of the kingdom of numbers, and I wish I had. To have that sort of facility in various areas, I think is a goal of education that unfortunately somehow we all too easily get shortchanged, maybe just shoved in one direction or the other, and not wide enough. But to have that breadth is very nice, and I look forward I kind of look with dread in the great books courses that we have here. Reading Aristotle now, who's hard enough, is almost mathematical in a lot of things, but if we continue as the plan is to go through the whole University of Chicago Great Books program, we've got to deal with Euclid and all these people, and my eyes just swim when I see equations on the page, and so I'm kind of dreading that myself, but just that, the idea that there's a challenge coming up is kind of fun. The idea that, okay, this is going to be hard, this is going to be interesting, and I don't know why so much of our inclination is to avoid that kind of challenge, avoid something that's difficult. intellectually, to learn something new is always sort of the most fun thing you can do. It's nice to, on the one hand, to hone your knowledge and to add stuff to, but also to continuously expand your horizons is very valuable. And that's why I think that languages, because they open cultural doors to do that, are just, they're a vehicle for that. I've been talking about this in my Principles of Polyglotary Literacy class and other places too. I would love to know more about mathematical thinking and maybe artistic thinking and even musical thinking, and the degree to which we might be able to really articulate what's going on in our brain other than verbally, if that's possible. To me, it doesn't seem possible. I don't know how to do that. It seems to me that we have to do that with words, and therefore that languages, because we can choose the languages, are sort of like the key to thinking. So that's sort of why I go at it. More than, I like them. They're curious. I'm interested in them. But yeah, they just open doors to other ways of thinking about things. So.
They open doors to a lot of the concepts, all of the ways of thinking we want them to learn too. There's this book called In Defense of Classical Education, written in 1918 by an English officer. He said, the goal of classical education is to know when a thing is proved and know when it's not. And I think about that a lot in terms of homeschooling the kids. And it was funny, I was thinking about it as you were just talking now. I started giving my daughter one page at a time of Familia Romana. I didn't tell her to do anything with it. I just gave it to her and said, hey, can you read this? Do you know what it means? Let's figure it out. And she's reading the pages and she's coming up to me and said, Daddy, I know what this means. I've done the deductive reasoning. This must mean this, and because of this means this and that. And it's all these reasoning skills on display. And she doesn't even think she's learning, but not only is she learning Latin, but she's learning how to get through an unfamiliar text and come out on the other side knowing what it says. And that was really very cool to watch with very little direction from me. And I think I'd love to keep that going as much as I can.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. I homeschooled my kids. We used, just in terms of languages, there was sort of a Middlebury College sort of language program early on that we used, but there was another program. But then ultimately we went to the Ron Paul curriculum, which emphasized very much what you just said, having the kids direct themselves. I mean, they encouraged the parents to step back and let the children just really take over the learning process and come out very independently, and taught them a lot of things that I truly value, and particularly my older son who went through that, just like internalized them. And one of the lessons was, for example, when you just had your class, you just studied, just learned something. What do you do now? Stop and go to something else? No. What do you do now? You summarize what you just learned. You stand and you lecture to the wall. If you have nobody else to, you just stand to the wall and you say in your own words what you just learned. Because if you can't do that, you didn't learn. If you can do that, you learned it. So, yeah, just instilling habits like that. After you learn, stop, say, what did I learn? Okay? And that way, and try to use your own words to say it. And in a foreign language, you'll be measuring your improving language skills as well as that too, but really measuring your comprehension and the degree to which you take it in. So, I think they started that when they were somewhat older, but you said your daughter's 8. I don't know when it's appropriate to start that, but she sounds like she's really quick, so you might want to look into that.
Yeah, I think so. That brings up to bring it down to a specific technique that I saw in your Catalan videos was the 1 minute speaking afterwards. Mm-hmm. And you said this in our consultation was the most important thing you can do is think in the language. And not think in such of creating silly sentences, but just recalling what you have learned and summarizing what you just did. And it was so inspiring in your Catalan videos to see where you were on day 1, where you did your 1 minute recall exercise, and it wasn't great. But then at day 31, you had a whole, half an hour just kind of monologue of speaking in Catalan.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking of it's too much work, but I was thinking of editing like my speaking minute and then putting them all together. Like day by day language progress. So day one, it just like you could, people, applied linguists, like to, watch stuff like that. Somebody could get something out of that and say, oh, day-to-day progress. I felt it growing. I felt it because precisely what you said, just that effort to to think in the language, from the very outset, just shift perspective from some things that were normally given, such that, learning a language is learning grammatical rules and vocabulary. And that's part of it, but that's so mundane. That's just part of the process. I mean, learning a language is instilling a new operating system in your mind. Learning a language is being able to process a different set of vibrational sounds coming in and make sense of it. It's the ability to take your imagination and your thought process and recast it in those sounds and those vibrations and those, and that flow that is produced when people speak a language. So if you think of it almost in those musical terms, or in those sort of challenging terms, or in other terms, again, yes, you do need to learn grammatical rules and you need to learn vocabulary, but that's not, you don't reduce it to that and say that's the sum of it. That's a function, if I want to build a bookcase, I need a hammer and a nail. I don't, but it's not just reduced to hitting the nail with the hammer. It's, the whole planning of the case and how it fits together and where it will go. And,
now, in your mind, with these operating systems, do you take out your Arabic operating system drawer and pull Arabic out, think in it, and then put it back, and take out your Spanish drawer and then put it back, or are these operating systems interacting with each other?
Well, maybe what you're getting at is one question that people ask me a lot is, do you mix languages up? And no, I don't have a problem with mixing languages up. If I'm speaking a weaker language, a newer language to me, a language that I have less experience, and I know another language that is either a sister language to that or has given a lot of vocabulary to that, I will both naturally and instinctively and also consciously rely on that and try to, use those words, because most of the time they'll be right. If I know how to pronounce them in the way the new language sort of says, try to make it sound a little bit more like that. So, I've never really felt that I had a problem with like languages getting mixed up and oh my God, I made a terrible mistake by saying that kind of thing. I think that problem of mixing languages up is, could be acute for students in, say, college who are, if you're taking your Italian exam and your Spanish exam back to back, that's a problem. If you've got if your exam consists of, conjugating subjunctive verbs and in these languages, you could very easily mix them up. So, I'm not saying there aren't occasions like that, but again, just for the most part, they shed light upon each other. They give each other much more context if you see them together. So I have used that analogy very much so for people who have those problems mixing up either closely related languages or even, people sometimes mix up Japanese and German. Those are the two languages they know because they don't put them in separate categories ever, and they just have them my foreign language category, and therefore they're both in the same place. So I do recommend if people have that they do that very conscious mental imagining of, opening a drawer and saying, okay, if I have problems mixing up my German and my Japanese, okay, I'm going to put my German here and take it out, put my Japanese here, take it out, put it in, and hopefully that will help. But if I don't have that problem, then I don't need to do that so consciously. But I think on some level I've done that in the background so that I'm aware of each operating system as such, but also just always very interested in comparing and contrasting the way
you want them to shed light on each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which I think is really interesting. And
I've always used the analogy of a language like German or Japanese or Arabic is a language with a small L, whereas language with a big capital L itself is the whole phenomenon of our speech communication, of moving our lips and tongues and, making vibrational resonances go through the air and, hit your ear and your eardrum, and you can interpret those as words and string them together. That whole phenomenon, all human languages do that, in different forms, and then we can analyze them in terms of, okay, these are this way, these are that way, and so to me, learning languages, small L, is fun, but it's also in itself, but it's also really enlightening because the more small languages you learn, the more you understand of the big one, of capital L. So
that's where kind of the way we do education is unsettling. Or even a program like DLI where it's just dealing with the little L. It says, this is part of the bigger picture. This is part of the big L language. And whenever we're dealing with little L language, we can't lose sight of the fact that it's part of this big L language experience that every human has.
Yeah. So that's great that you're starting your daughter already on Latin. She's 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you want to have her do Greek, German, French without forcing her. Just give her the opportunities to have that. And that's just her. That's number 1. She's 8. Then come the others all, so.
Yeah,
you'll have that. Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah. I think the most important thing that I did in raising my sons to speak French, my accent is not the best. I talk to them, so they definitely sound like American kids speaking French, but they're perfectly comprehensible, and they, I went through all the Alliance Française programs in Singapore and Dubai and, passed all the tests and did all that kind of thing and are perfectly happy and comfortable speaking in French, whereas a lot of French kids or half French kids, in the international community out there in the world are very resistant to doing so. And that's something that in those classes in the Alliance Française, Singapore or Dubai, both teachers and the other parents would sometimes come to us. How come your kids, are happy speaking French? These other kids are always like, we're here forcing them and they don't want to do it. And your sons don't mind. Mm. And I said, well, it's, literally what I do is, I read to them. I read them books in English too. I read them books in some other languages also, but, I did show a marked preference. I would, if I were choosing books, I would choose French language books to read aloud to them. But if they wanted to read others, we would do that. But so I always read aloud to them, just made a point of, I want to speak this to you because I like speaking this. I like speaking French. So I want to speak French to you because I like it. Because this is fun. I really like French. And I don't think that most French people could truly say, they've got this national, it's my language, I've got to feel like, yes, I'm French. But do they really like, I don't think most people, nobody does. Do you really like, I don't really like my hand, I don't really like my hair, it's just there, but for some reason I really like French. And that just sort of got communicated about. I really like German. I really like Latin. I just sort of communicated that to my sons and, they can pick that up. And I think that's a good thing you can do to your kids. Yeah.
Was there a line where you said, okay, I'm sharing what I'm passionate about with my kids. I'm also going to make them do some stuff because they need some discipline. They need to learn how to work hard and do things they don't necessarily want to do. But I don't want to cross the line where now I'm unnecessarily pushing something onto them that's untoward or that they don't need.
Well, I mean, like I never said, okay, now you're going to, here as an 8-year-old, you're going to write your analytical essay on the stories of Franz Kafka. I didn't have that kind of expectation, but yeah, just as, as long as it was part of the active homeschooling curriculum that I was doing, it was just sort of the same way we did it successfully integrated, I think, into sort of the homeschooling idea. What I personally have found that in most of the schools that I've been, and as a student and as a teacher, haven't done so successfully, is to integrate the teaching of languages into other subjects. So I was able to know the difference between teaching languages and other subjects, and so teach them differently, but still teach them within the constraints of that framework, that time frame, that kind of thing. Whereas in my experience, most often school systems, like I think you were saying, your wife is a chemist, it's like, and you were giving that example, and it's like this is taught like we're teaching chemistry. You just teach it in a different fashion. So yeah, I would, to me, knowing Latin, French, and German are about as core foundational things that one could possibly have as an educated mind. And that might be extreme from many people's perspectives, but I didn't throw Greek and Sanskrit in there. I mean, I would like to do that. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, I would just say yes to sons, from where I sit, yes, languages are important. You do need to know these languages. This is the language that all our languages come from. These are core foundational languages. These are major educational languages. That you need to know these, otherwise you're not educated. But you can't design only languages for people who don't specifically want that. It's just that will never work. That will backfire. So, well, good. We've talked about a lot of things, Eythan. I really appreciate your coming up here and just sort of sharing of minds, sharing of feelings about what it means to be educated, and particularly in the realm of languages, and what we ought to aspire to do, and how we can inspire our kids to do that, and also just in giving me a hand with all this moving of boxes around here. So maybe we should get back to that.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm going to spend some more time trying to convince you to bring some more, push-ups and a little bit more drill sergeant kind of attitude towards the academy, and maybe we'll get some physical competition. Or
I'd like that. Say more. I just was trying to say goodbye, but let's get talking about what are you saying here. What can I do there? I like that idea. I've always liked the idea of combining mental, physical, and spiritual exercise, but thus far, in terms of doing that kind of thing, which I can envision sort of really encouraging, like as we walked around today, and in the parks or something like that. That needs to be kind of in person or live, and the academy is mainly virtual right now. That's why it's so nice to meet you here in person. Like I met Christian a couple of weeks ago and other people, so know that you're not just figments of the imagination, artificial intelligence creations and things like that. But yeah, I would love to have sort of those retreats, as it were, some get-togethers. But what were you thinking of when you said bring that sort of spirit drill stuff? How could that help? What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking every time we mispronounce a word in Arabic, 5 push-ups. I don't think you'd have a lot of students after that one. But
yeah, no, maybe I won't do that.
But no, I think like we were talking, the physical dimension is very important. And I'm always hounding my teachers at DLI to let us go outside and have class outside. We were talking a little bit about the officer training that I went through a while ago in the Army, and there's a big academic part of it, but when it really started to click was when we were outside, and when we were, we would learn a focused thing for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we would take a break and then learn the next thing, and then we'd have these big exercises that brought everything together and brought it all part of the bigger picture. But that all happened outside in this very physical environment. We're physical bodies. We want to use our bodies with our brains. And it's, like you said before, it's a gift that we can do things virtually. We can have this access with each other, but, anything we can do in the physical space, you say the word and I'll be there.
Yeah, no, that's very encouraging. I just, I guess that's one message that I feel like I've failed to get across more than others is the degree to which, my learning, my studies has always been kinesthetic. It has been physical. It's been moving around. It's been outside. It's not just, scriptorium and shadowing sitting at my desk. It's doing it, outside, going for a walk, going for a hike, going, for this kind of thing. And, to me, that as well as the breaking things into chunks of say 15 minutes and switching gears and doing things also, switching gears with something like, physical activity. So, in my mind, as we were walking and talking today, in the park, I said it would just be ideal to say, okay, we could stop at this table and study verbs for 20 minutes, and then here's a hike, 20-minute hike through the woods, and then you come to the next table, and then this is a place for, doing some other language or some other activity. So, to intersperse that sort of mental, intellectual exercise with physical exercise, sometimes to combine the two and have them be the same, has always been very integral to what I personally do, and how I would love to, if I could ever get that sort of live atmosphere to be a drill sergeant to train people, that might be kind of fun. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for this talk. And if you out there have listened to this and enjoyed this whole conversation, thank you so much for being here. Again, Eythan here is going to be in my Arabic class. So if you want to come read Arabic with us, you're welcome to do that. But I have a lot of other classes that we've been talking about here, and anybody who wants to ever just sit in on anything and see what it's like firsthand, you're welcome to have a trial visit. I'm particularly excited about the sort of the Learn as I Would French class that's coming up soon in October. I think that's going to be a neat way of reaching people and helping people to develop the ability to teach themselves all their languages in a way that I find really more sort of opening, more expanding, more enriching than other activities that I've done. I guess that's the value of learning languages to me, is that it just makes you feel like a richer person. So if you're interested in that, come join people like Eythan and me in my academy. And thank you for listening to us.
Thanks.
Bye.